What is going on, guys? Tony here, and today I want to talk about float. This is a very common topic, a very common term that every trader throws around, but not many beginners understand exactly what float is, and I believe it is a very critical component when it comes to researching stocks and exactly picking out what stocks to play. So essentially, float is the total amount of available supply in the stock. It's the supply of shares that are able to be actively traded through the market. So this is not outstanding shares, because outstanding shares, there could be restricted shares, there could be shares held by insiders, investors. We just care about the public float that's being traded every single day. So as you can imagine, a company like Apple has a ton of supply. They have over a 1 billion share float. So what that means is that it's going to take a lot more money to move that stock. So let's just use a basic example, and let's use a stock that has a $1 share price and a float of 100 million shares. This means that the total supply costs about $100 million. If you wanted to buy out the entire supply, it would cost you $100 million. And as we know, basic economics, price is a balance between supply and demand. And if it's easier to buy out the supply, you can make the stock spike a lot easier. On the flip side, if there is a ton of supply available, it's going to take a lot more money to move that stock towards the upside. So that's why me personally and a lot more day traders, we like to focus on low floats. These are stocks that it doesn't take as much money to move the price. So if we use the same example of a $1 share price, but a float of only 5 million shares, then that means that you can buy out the entire supply with only $5 million. You can tell that that's a lot lower than $100 million. So it will take a lot less traders, a lot less people buying into the stock to move the share price significantly. And this is very important for day traders because we need to profit off of that volatility. And frankly, when you have big shares floats over 100 million and higher, it's going to take a lot more volume and a lot more action to really move the stock in the direction that you want. So some of the main things that you need to know about float is that it is not outstanding shares, because outstanding shares can include restricted shares. You need to find the float. If the float is lower, then that means that it will take a lot less money to move the stock. But keep in mind also that float is relative to price. So for example, let's say that we have a stock that's, 25 cents a share. At that point, having a float of like 50 million shares, even though the float itself is big, if you multiply the float by the share price, you can get kind of the value of the supply. And it wouldn't take that much money to move that stock. On the flip side, if we have a stock that's like $20 per share and the float's only 10 million shares, that still requires $200 million to move the price in one direction or another. So make sure that you don't focus on just float. It has to kind of be float times share price, because you want to kind of see how much volume or how much money is necessary to buy a lot of the supply and move the stock in one direction or another. Because keep in mind, price is dictated solely based on the balance between supply and demand. So if the supply is really tiny and having a few hundred traders buy into a stock makes the supply cut in half, then of course, even if demand stays the same, price is going to jump really high. So you can see how powerful it is to understand the concept of supply and demand, and more importantly, understand exactly how much money it would take to buy out the float. Some ways you can find float. I personally use equity feed, and Trade Ideas. These are two paid scanners. I have links down below for them. I highly recommend them if you're serious about trading, and they can immediately give you the float values and news and so many other values as well. I'll put up a thing right here. If you cannot afford scanners or you're just not at that level yet, there are a lot of free options. There is FinViz, there is Yahoo Finance. I think MarketWatch has float as well, but the main one I would use is finviz.com. This is a completely free website. I am not affiliated with them at all, but it is a very useful tool for traders to use to do some kind of preliminary research before they jump into a trade. So that is essentially the basics of float. It is just the total supply available to be traded. Some things to keep in mind about float are that it's not so much having a low float just by itself, but more so a combination of low float and low price. We want to see an overall low total value of the supply of shares. Also, another thing too is that none of this matters if we don't have volume in the stock. So don't just go out there and buy any, micro float that exists, because it's not going to move at all unless there is active volume going through the stock. So what we like to focus on is float rotations. This is a more advanced term. I'll go into this in a later video, but essentially you want to find stocks where the daily dollar volume exceeds the total value of the current supply. This is going to lead to the most volatile stocks that have the big 100, 200, even 1000% spikes. So if you guys enjoyed this lesson, please feel free to drop a subscription and hit the bell next to that so you get notified of my future videos. And also, I hate to ask, but leave a like and comment down below if you have any questions. This helps me kind of boost up in the YouTube algorithm, and I would really appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm assuming that if you stuck around all this time, you must have really enjoyed that video lesson. If you want to continue your learning with me, I just opened up a free trading workshop. You can register completely for free, no strings attached, and you're going to get access to 3 training videos that break down exactly the secrets that no one is telling you about how to trade profitably. And I'm also going to be giving you access to my top PDFs. Number 1, my free book, How to Day Trade Every Single Morning. Number 2, my personal trading checklist. Let me show you right here. This right here that I use every single day to plan my trades. And also, I will give you a list of the top 10 most profitable trade strategies of 2019. So you can check all this out in the first link down below, and I really hope to see you in there. Keep in mind that I give out these workshops once a week, and there's only about 30 spots per week. So make sure you get in there now, click the link below, and I'll see you inside.